in the leadership of the NRA, kind of until this latest regime, the regime that is still in power, just because Wayne has been found guilty of corruption. Here he comes, Jeff. And we're going to any second, I hope. Maybe. Jeff, I accepted. If that didn't come through. Oh, there he is. All right, Jeff, there you are.
Hey, my boomer's showing.
That's all right. So I was just telling everybody that basically you've been involved in one way or another, this a strong NRA, like from birth. And
Right.
your dad was a great leader in the organization for a time, pretty much until the current regime. And I do think it's still the current regime, just because Wayne has resigned and stepped aside and been found guilty of the corruption that we've known was there for a long time. I think that regime is still in power. And you and a few other guys are going to be in a position with the support of NRA members, voting members first, and kind of all members, I think, in a much more important way, to help with real reform moving forward. I think the door is open for some real reform now. So right away, when I started talking about the idea that this was our topic tonight, people were asking me, who should we vote for? Do I have some recommendations? And I said, yes, in fact, here's a guy, Jeff Knox, who is definitely one of those recommendations. But what I hoped you would do is take a few minutes and let everybody kind of hear from you what you're all about, why you're involved, kind of the short version of the history, but especially the current version of what you think reform means. And then we'll talk about your three other reform candidates for a little while.
Okay. Well, as you say, my dad was very active with NRA. He led the revolt at Cincinnati in 1977 that brought in the gun rights movement into the NRA as a mainstream part of the NRA. And I've been a life member since '78. I started buying my life membership at full price with my first paycheck out of basic training, and I've been active ever since. What we're looking at right now is at least 20 years of the situation getting worse and worse. Back in 95, 96, Dad tried to rein in LaPierre and the vendors, and he failed. They brought in Charlton Heston and bumped Dad out of the chairs. And unfortunately, Dad died a few years later, and I've been running our group, the Firearms Coalition, ever since. But what we're hoping to do, there's 4 of us that are the reform candidates for the board. We all were nominated by petition of the members, which is not an easy task. And so we're on the ballot. Our objective is to bring transparency and accountability into the organization. Ideally, me personally, I would like to see the board reduced down to 9 to 15 members. I'm voting yes on the bylaw proposal to create the office of the chief compliance officer. That's a function that should have been handled by the audit committee, but the audit committee has failed miserably for years. David Coy was the chairman for many years, and then he turned over the chair to Charles Cotton, and Coy remained as the vice chair. And now those two are the president and vice president of the NRA and still retain their seats as the chair and vice chair of the audit committee. So we definitely need cleaning up right there. I want to make sure that not only is Wayne LaPierre walking away without a parachute, but that no parachute gets slipped to him at some later date. The guy has gotten way more than enough from NRA members and should get no more.
I can definitely agree with all of that. And of course, making the board smaller and more effective is something that Save the Second, the organization that we started up back in 2000, 19, when all of this stuff really blew up, I think for most members, they became aware that there was even controversy with some of the leadership of the NRA. Smaller board is definitely one of the things that is incredibly important, and a smaller board would bring with it most of the other reforms that we're interested in. Let's talk about the other members of your cohort here, the 4 other members. Now, of them, I think 2 of them have already served on the board. Is that correct?
Right. Rocky Marshall and Phil Journey have both been on the board. Phil was on the board back in the 90s with Dad and was one of the reformers back then. But along with Dad and his other supporters on the board at that time, Phil was purged off the board. But he managed to maintain some friendships along the way, and he somehow, I think it was Susan Howard that helped to get him nominated through the nominating committee a few years ago. And he served for 3 years. As soon as he got in, he said, "Holy cow, Jeff was right. This is really bad. It's worse than I thought." And he started trying to fix things. And he was a lone voice in the wilderness, but they very quickly ostracized him. And of course, after his 3-year term was up, they did not renominate him. And so he went to run by petition.
I think that's important to talk about, because for most people that are kind of ardent reformers, people that have been interested enough to still be holding the position of we need to reform the NRA and not just have walked away, they would say anybody who's been nominated in the last, many cycles, last 10, 12 years is probably blackballed. But Phil Journey is a unique exception to that. And I'm with you. I'm not exactly sure how he got on through the nominating committee, but he did. And he made it very clear for anybody who hasn't been following at a really detailed level. He was involved in court action against the NRA. He's been very vocal, and again, was ostracized and made very ineffective as one of the 76 board members that currently serve. So don't take that as the automatic black eye with Phil.
Right. And I would correct something that you just said, that he wasn't in court actions against the NRA. He filed in a way that the NRA didn't like, that the leadership didn't like, but he was looking during their bankruptcy trial. He was trying to get they call it an examiner, to be appointed to really look into what the NRA's finances were doing and who was doing it. And they really, really opposed that. But he spent a lot of money trying to do that. Unfortunately, his hands were tied to some degree in a lot of what was going on, and it continues to go on, because Phil is a district court judge in Kansas, and he has certain judicial ethics rules that he has to follow that limit some of the things that he can and can't do. And so that's been challenging. Then we have Rocky Marshall, and Rocky, he's a businessman out of Texas. Lives in the Bernie, Texas area. And Rocky got nominated by petition, didn't make the cut, but then people resigned and passed away, and Rocky got bumped up into a short seat at the table, and I think he served about 10 months on the board. During that time, he was very active. Rocky's a numbers guy. He understands finances. He was a vice president of a Fortune 100 corporation, and he was looking at the finances and saying, "Guys, we're in deep, deep trouble. This is this is double not good." And so Rocky is a great asset, and I think that he'll be very helpful to have if we can get him back on the board.
Right.
Our final candidate.
I want to say real quick, for a lot of people that have been following the reform and what STS has been doing, Frank Tate, somebody that we were very vocal, all of us, in supporting, very similar story to Rocky Marshall. He's not running right now. He's not part of the reform opportunity to vote for
we're going to get him
right now.
Next year.
Next year, hopefully he'll be there. But Frank has a very, so for people who are familiar with Frank's story, businessman, came in, aggressively looking to make a change. Rocky Marshall very much fits that same storyline. And now to
Right.
Dennis.
Right. Dennis Fusaro is our fourth candidate, if you include me. And Dennis is just he considers himself just a regular NRA member. But Dennis has been extremely active in the fight and in politics for many years. I actually met Dennis almost 40 years ago, or right at 40 years ago. Dennis came in and asked us if there was any work that he could do for the Firearms Coalition. And he was fresh out of the Marine Corps and wanted to get active in the Second Amendment fight. And we said, well, sorry, we don't have anything to have you do, but here's Larry Pratt's phone number. Why don't you give Larry a call and see if he's got something for you? And Larry did, and Dennis worked for Gun Owners of America for a bit. He worked for the Right to Work Committee for a while. He's been very active in various political campaigns and actually filed a lawsuit a couple of years ago on a First Amendment case in Maryland and won, which was pretty astounding. But Dennis has been in the fight for at least 40 years. I've known him for right at 40 years, and very good guy, very dedicated, stand-up guy, and so we're happy to have him on our slate.
Well, I think it's great. I appreciate you joining and fighting through the hiccups of Instagram. I think it's an easier way to reach this audience, and then we can take this, we'll put it out on YouTube. Some people will be able to share it, link it, put it out in all the normal places that people get their information. The NRA Board of Directors is and always has been sort of the opportunity for people who are outside of the organization to get a seat at the table. That table has been dominated and controlled by a regime that has not been answering to the members for a long time, and I think acting outside of the members' best interest for a long time. You guys have an opportunity to get in there right now. I think it's a good opportunity, and I hope you get all the support. Let's talk a little bit about bullet voting, why it's important. In your words, first, why is it important that people interested in reform vote for the four of you and don't vote for anybody else?
Well, the way NRA voting works, you get the ballot, you have, anyway, you have 25 choices, and they've got 34 people on the ballot. 25 of those 34 are incumbents. They're people who have been on that board for a long time. The longest serving has been on that board since 1980. And that's Wayne Anthony Ross of Alaska. And he's up for re-election in this run. You've also got our past president, whose name just left me, the woman from Georgia, Meadows, Carolyn Meadows.
Carolyn, yeah.
And she was too ill to appear for the trial and too ill to do a video for the trial, so they used her deposition from the bankruptcy, I assume, or a recorded deposition from somewhere before in that, but she's on the ballot again. But anytime, the way it works is everybody votes for up to 25 candidates, and every one of those votes, when you vote for someone else, you're voting against the four of us, in essence. So if you bullet vote, if you restrict your voting to only a handful of people, that adds weight to your ballot and gives strength to your vote. You're not canceling other votes with a short bullet vote. There are a couple of guys, I will give an honorable mention to Buzz Mills of Gunsight. Buzz has stood up, has voted right, has tried to ask the tough questions, has called out the board at times, and he's on this ballot. But quite frankly, Buzz doesn't need our help. He always ends up in the top 10. He's going to win a seat. And he has told us, don't put me in your your stuff. I support you. I endorse you. But I don't need your help, and don't water down your message with that. And I appreciate that from Buzz. So I'm going to water down my message with that mention.
Well,
But
I do think that makes sense from Buzz, what Buzz is saying, and Buzz has been vocal. He's been one of the more vocal members, I would say, over the last 5 to 6 years. And that was not always as loud as he has gotten as this has dragged
right,
on. He's gotten louder, which has been good to see. There's other people. I have friends who are currently serving or on the ballot that they have not done this. They've not done what you're doing,
right,
and
right,
I love them to death. I wish them all the support and happiness in the world in other things. But if they aren't on the board to do the work, then, and the work right now is the work of reform and rebuilding the NRA, then I'm sure there's other things that they can continue to be successful at, but no need to mention them now. They know who they are and love them to death, him, her, whoever they are. Don't need to
well,
mention them, because while we have friends there, and while we know some people have spoken out and said some of the right things, there's very few people who have stayed on the board over the last 5 to 6 years who have really done the right things.
right.
Phil Journey would be one of those, Frank Tate, Rocky Marshall. I hope to see you there. I know you've been working on this for a long time. As I said in the introduction before you joined us, you've been working on this very, very ardently for a couple of decades, because you knew this was going to come to a head. You saw
Right.
the writing on the wall. You lived through some of the sketchier moments of the NRA before it all became sketchy and went public. So thank you for the work you continue to do. We're going to get this message out as much as we can, make it available for you and the other guys, and tell the other guys if they'd like to utilize whether it's the Save the Second platform or anything I can do to help them get their personal messages out. Obviously, the four of you have my endorsement and the endorsement of the Save the Second organization, which has been calling for reform very loudly at meetings, at board meetings, at members meetings, and in the media since this all broke open in 2019.
Well, I appreciate that a lot, Rob. And yeah, I've been sort of a self-appointed watchdog in my father's footsteps for the last 20 years, and was at his side for the 20 years before that as an NRA member, and helping him to push for reform within the organization. I think that people who watch me, people who know me, recognize that I'm not a bitter person. I'm not a person who runs off of anger or hatred by any means. I am a rational, straightforward guy who's trying to do the right thing in everything that I do. And I've been referred to by some as a straight shooter, and I really like that moniker. And I try and live up to it at all times. We know that we're not going to change the NRA with just the four of us. We do hope that a lot of those people who have been sitting on the fence that are on the board, I think that most of the board of directors, the vast majority of them, are individually stellar people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they want to do the right thing. I think that they feel like they're kind of in a bind, and one of the most common things they say is, well, I think I can do more on the inside than the outside, and if I speak up now, I'm going to be on the outside, and yada yada yada. And it's like, sorry, stand up.
Yeah.
I'm hoping
that's been an old saw for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, even back in 2014, when I ran and was asked by Wayne to step aside because they had other things they wanted me to do, I was already identifying myself as a rabble rouser, I guess, in his world. And the reality was, I thought getting on the board back then was a means to another end. And I think
Right.
a lot of people continue to serve with either their board position being a feather in their cap, or to allow them to do the other good work they've already been doing in their home states or in their niche areas of the gun world, as
Right.
opposed to working for the NRA. And that's why I said that I was not going to ever run again until there was actually an opportunity on post reform to get involved. And we're seeing that move in that direction. So maybe at some point in the future, but in the meantime, I proudly endorse and support what you're doing. I do find you to be a straight shooter. We've known each other for years, and you speak truth. You speak as a witness to what's happened, and also with some really good ideas for what should happen. I've heard people suggest, well, this is all about the past and it's about other things. It's not. I know that you're heavily involved in day-to-day what's happening now and what can happen and should happen in the future. So
Right.
thank you very much for that. And like I said, tell your other guys if they want to chit chat. I'd be happy to help them reach some more people, and we'll get this message out there.
Okay. All right. I appreciate it, Rob. And I will add in that so far as I know, I'm the only candidate with a wiener dog. He's a little bit startled. We had a rainstorm come in right as you started. But I was talking to Ted Nugent yesterday. He has endorsed the four of us, and I'm real pleased that he's done that. We've got the endorsements of a number of other prominent people, Tom Gresham, Michael Bain, state leaders like Gary Marbut in Montana and Kevin Sterrett in Oregon, Philip Van Cleve in Virginia. They've all stepped up and put their name on it and said, yeah, we understand that change needs to happen, and you guys are the start of it.